the community development meeting of September 8th to order. Joanna, if you will show both committee members and staff are present.
Noted.
Jessica, do you have any issues with the minutes of April 13th?
I do not.
Okay. Joanne, if you'll show both members are okay with the minutes, and brings us to public comment on non-agenda items.
Thank you.
See, we have one person in attendance. Is there any public comment?
I believe if somebody would like to participate in public comment, they need to raise their hand using the raise hand function.
Seeing none. Did you receive any by email, Joanna?
There was an email. Chantel uploaded that to the amended agenda today.
Okay, so it's already part of the record.
Yeah. Did
Seeing-
you have a chance to look at that?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
So seeing none will bring us to conduct of business. 3A, receive report and make recommendation to City Council to update building permit fees. Chantel, I believe this is you.
Yes, sir.
All right.
All right. So we know usually we have undertaken the fee updates annually. This year we decided that instead of taking them as one cohesive package, what we would try to do is just be a little bit more specific and hone in on certain types of fees and just kind of take them one at a time or at the time under which we felt like we were having issues, either with the collection methods or concerns about the fees, and just making sure that they are truly reflective of the cost of the services that we're providing to the citizens. And so for many years, as you are probably aware, we were collecting building permit fees based on the valuation of the permits. And that fee method included basically three components. There was the 1% building permit surcharge, there was a 1.5% general plan maintenance charge, and a 0.04% business license fee. And all of those were a percentage of the permit valuation. And so last year in 2019, fees came before council 3 times, but basically the primary changes happened in May of 2019, where we took the building permit fees away from using a strictly valuation based method, and we started using a more flat fee driven methodology. And so we basically were able to last year tier fees within certain components of fees. So one of the figures that I have, sorry, let me just make sure I'm saying this right. Sorry, this Zoom thing this is my first time doing it this way, so bear with me for a second here. Okay, so those tiered figures were permits that came in with a valuation of $0 to $10,000, costed $158. If a permit was between $10,000 and $25,000, it was $250 a permit, et cetera. And it went up to a $75,000 valuation, and anything over that, we would use a DDA. And so what we found was that many permits were coming in above that amount. And so what we had initially thought about processing permits with DDAs as being, not too challenging, actually ended up being quite a significant amount of work for staff. The staff time components that went up mostly were the finance department's time. So when we would get a building permit in, we would have to then send it to the county to get a valuation. Sometimes that would take 2 weeks. By the time we got that valuation back, then we could establish the DDA. Usually during that time, staff has already processed the permit and it's through the queue and it's out. We've already done our timesheets. And so going back and recounting for, the staff time billed became really challenging. So some staff were doing it directly on their timesheets. Some staff were trying to track it via spreadsheets, and there wasn't really a cohesive way that we were tracking down the way that these fees were charged. And so we found that we were spending a lot of time managing those DDAs, whether it was staff going back and trying to figure out when and how they had billed, or whether it was finance having to go and pull the information from Springbrook from one account, which is where we would bill our time to, and then charging it back to the fees from the applicant. And so what was happening is we were finding that we had several overdrafted DDAs where we then had to go back to an applicant and collect more funds. Sometimes we were finding that because a permit was already processed before we even had the DDA check-in, that those applicants were hardly being charged anything because we weren't necessarily finding all the components that were associated with it. And so it just became really, really complicated. Another part that really complicated the factor was the person that processes the building permits when they bring them in for their intake. They tend to do those in bulk. So we would do them in batches. So when Joanna takes in a permit, she might, have to do the processing, create the folders, do all the copying and collating, and then she would transfer it through the routing process. But oftentimes she'll do that with multiple permits at the same time. And so what was really challenging about back charging that was breaking down, one permit into a 15-minute time period as part of her timesheet. And then sometimes over a 2-week time frame, she'll have touched the same permit 4 times, but she'll have also touched several other permits during that same duration. So it becomes really tricky to kind of tease out the exact amount of time spent on it. So what we decided to do, because of a lot of these problems that we were having, is I reviewed the way that other cities track building permits. And I did find that there were basically 2 primary ways that happens. First, many cities do use this valuation-based method, but a lot of times those are for cities that have building inspectors on staff. And so it directly relates back to the California Building Code. The other way that I found is that some cities have started moving towards more of a task tracking matrix, which is what I've proposed before you today. And what that has allowed us to do is really break down the way that we charge fees based on the actual tasks that are associated with processing that specific permit. So I've described here, kind of exactly what we might do. I broke it down into engineering or public works review, and then also community development review, because we are the 2 primary plan checkers that would basically be the cost to the city. And I've listed out, what components of that review include. And then I further went in and I basically said, having been both in Joanna's role all the way through doing the planning plan check and now, working on the engineering plan check, I